Islam in Africa, one of the continent's main religions. Islam arrived early to Africa in the 7th century. By the 11th century, Islam had spread across North Africa and also to parts of the East and West. In this program, we look at how Islam took hold in Africa and how it assumed a uniquely African guise, and how the powerful Islamic dynasties of the Berbers in North Africa created empires that stretched across the continent and extended as far as Europe. Here in Tunisia, people gather for a very special annual event. Hunting with birds, a sport beloved by the Arabs, is popular today across North Africa. The Arabs arrived in Africa in the first half of the 7th century, and their influence is particularly evident across the north of the continent. The Arabs brought their faith, language and culture. Today, Islam is the dominant religion and Arabic the main language in the region.
ازيك اهلا كيف حالك؟ اوه ممكن ناخذ شكرا So this is the yeah he wants me to dance with it. You know, the Falcon Festival here at Al Hawariya in northeastern Tunisia takes place, it takes place just once a year. And these birds actually migrate from Arabia to this part of North Africa in search of food in those mountains there behind me. And the locals really just have this festival. They keep the bird. Oh! Well, the locals here keep these birds as a hobby just for a couple of months to train them for this festival. And what they do is they throw a bird and then the falcon is supposed to run after and catch it. And if your falcon does that, then it's done well. But with falconry, actually, it goes back centuries. The Arabs actually used falcons for hunting, and handling them is a skill which is just handed down from generation to generation. But you'll be glad to hear that these falcons, after a couple of months, they are returned, they're freed, they're liberated, and they go back to their home in Arabia.
الطائر هذا هو طائر البرني، وهو من فصيلة الصقور أو الشواهين عند الخليجيين. هذا يعيش معنا في الجبل هنا في تونس في الهوارية. ناخذ 4 طيور صغيرة من الأعشاش الموجودة في الجبال الهوارية. أول حاجة هي احنا نصطادوا بهم الحجل والسمان والحمام، وخاصة طائر الحجل، خاطر هذايا عنده سرعة كبيرة وفائقة توصل حتى ل 380 كيلومتر في الساعة. وهذا
300 كيلومتر في
الساعة. أي عند القنص
30 كيلومتر an hour. واو.
أي وطريقة الصيد نتاع طائر البرني من أعلى إلى أسفل. أي ياخذ العلو ثم ينزل على الفريسة.
Beautiful creature. Thank you very much indeed. شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا.
I make my way from the festival in Hawariya and head to the capital, Tunis, to see another example of North Africa's Arab heritage. The famous Arabian stallion is the most highly prized horse in the region to this day. The Qasar Sayyid Hippodrome in Tunis is where locals keep their thoroughbreds, and Haytham As-Sayyid wants to show me his horse.
Very nice to see you. Thank you.
Hi Zainab, how are you?
Fine, thank you. So, Haytham, thank you so much for showing me your beautiful horse. This is the Arabian breed. What makes it so special and why was it significant historically?
Well, the Arabian breed is very special because the Arabian horse adapts itself to our climate, which is the whole North Africa, where the heat is extreme, and they can survive very well on it, even on little water. They have plenty of stamina. This is the reason why they were used for the big conquests, historically speaking. They have plenty of speed as well. This is why we raised them in Tunisia. And as a breed, in general, they are smart, they are intelligent, and with plenty of character.
I haven't ridden a horse for many, many years. I think I'll leave it to you or somebody else to show us just what this horse can do. Thank you so much. Are you going to help me get off now?
The Arabian stallion was amongst the most treasured of the animals that the Arabs brought with them to Africa. The Arabs' intention was to spread their Muslim faith, and one of the first places they set their sights on was Egypt. The Arabs came to Egypt very early in the history of Islam. An Arab commander called Amr ibn al-As arrived in the country with a small army around 640.
This is the site of the oldest mosque in Egypt. It's called Amr ibn al-As after the brilliant Arab general who conquered Egypt and brought Islam to the country. The mosque is situated in Fustat, the new capital he established for Egypt, and it's part of modern-day Cairo. The present mosque dates back from the late 18th century and is built in a style which reflects the simplicity of the original mosque.
The conversion of the Egyptians to Islam was gradual. I meet Dr. Abdelbaki Al-Sayed, an Islamic scholar inside Egypt's famous Al-Azhar Mosque in Cairo. He told me that Amr ibn al-As completed his conquest through a peace agreement with the Egyptians.
كان هناك رؤية وبعد كبير جدا من عمرو بن العاص أن يتعامل مع المصريين بطريقة اللين، بطريقة التسامح، وهذا ما جعل الأقباط كلهم إلا قليل منهم يتحالفون مع عمرو بن العاص واستقبلوا الإسلام بكل ترحاب.
He didn't just bring Islam with him, he also introduced Arabness to Egypt, didn't he?
لكن بدأ يعلم الناس الحوار في المسجد كان بيتم باللغة العربية، تلاوة القرآن كان بيتم باللغة العربية. التحول إلى اللغة العربية لم يأخذ وقتاً طويلاً.
After penetrating Egypt, the Arabs decided to attack the Christian Nubians in northern Sudan, who by now had been Christian for hundreds of years. The Arabs went to the town of Old Dongola and destroyed the cathedral there, so that today all you can see are just ruins of some early churches. Professor Yusuf Fadil is one of Sudan's foremost experts on the arrival of Islam, and he explains how a truce known as a Pact was struck between the Nubians and the Arabs.
The first contact between Islam and the Sudan was 651 AD. Now, no sooner has Islam spread in Egypt than the Nubians here began to make skirmishes in the southern part of Egypt, sort of defending or coming to the assistance of their Christian brothers there. And that caused some annoyance. The Caliph in Medina decided to put an end to that. So they began to send a kind of winter attacks to stop the Nubians from doing this. In the end, they decided to send a campaign against the Nubians to stop them from harassing the inhabitants of southern Egypt. And that came what we call the Pact Agreement. Now, the Pact Agreement is a treaty of no aggression. Each will not attack the other. That is, in essence. This treaty continued for something like 600, 700 years.
Nubia had managed to hang on to its independence. The Pact or treaty lasted for 6 centuries, and the Nubians continued to practice their Christian faith. But in the end, the Nubians and other people in what is today's Sudan could not resist the tide of Islam, which came to them from 2 directions, from the north and from the east. From the north, trade, interaction, as well as military expeditions from Egypt to Nubia meant its Christian heritage began to unravel. Islam also entered Sudan from the east, from Arabia, just a short journey across the Red Sea.
The one across the Red Sea were purely Arabs. They heard of the Sudan that there are plenty of grazing ground, water. So the news came to them through those merchants who have been to the Sudan and people began to infiltrate, at first in very small numbers, unnoticed, and continued until it reached its peak during the 13th, 14th, and 15th century, the climax of the Arab migration. That is one attraction. The second one is that in the Eastern Desert, Arabs discovered gold mines and emerald. And this is, to them, constituted a gold rush. They came in large numbers.
Did these Arabs integrate? Did they intermarry, for instance, with the local populations?
A lot of intermarriage. I would say it has produced something very unique. If you take it in the way of culture, by way of music, we are more African-oriented in our music than any Arabian. This is the first sign. The color itself is more African than Arabs as such. In the behavior, we have a lot of Arabian customs and the same African ones.
Give us some examples.
Yeah, the way the people behave, being generous to the people who come along the road, this is more of an Arab country, perhaps. Now, if you take the facial marks, this is an African custom. And you see it on my face, and I have been there for a long time. This is an African custom. When the Arabs came, they adopted it.
However, the custom of tribal marks is one that has died out today in Sudan. As in many other parts of Africa, Islam in Sudan took on a distinctly Sufi or mystic identity infused with local colour, music and dance. These people are referred to as the whirling dervishes, though to be accurate, they are groups of worshippers who sway, twirl and dance and chant praise to Allah repeatedly, building themselves up into a high state of spirituality. They congregate every Friday in a suburb of the capital, Khartoum. Can you describe what the main features of Sufism is and the dervishes that we see today in Sudan?
Personally, I think it's more of an African influence in it more than any other thing. Perhaps the wailing has been there, but if you take the way they beat the drum, it's more of an African tune. When you hear the drum beating like that, you'd feel an urge to go and join the group and dance.
What's the principal purpose, though, of the dance? To get into a trance?
Well, perhaps some of them do get in a trance. But in that action, one hopes that they will get identified with Islamic teaching and religion and so on, and they will say their prayers properly. So that is perhaps a means to bring them, but not an end in itself.
Let's now turn to the powerful Islamic dynasties that became established in North Africa. It was another Arab general, Uqba ibn Nafi', who swept across North Africa and introduced Islam to this part of the continent. He was the nephew of Amr ibn al-As, who'd brought Islam to Egypt. Uqba ibn Nafi' first arrived in North Africa around 644. He defeated the Berbers, who followed their traditional religions or were Jewish or Christian. Their conversion to Islam took place over a period of time. The legacy of Uqba ibn Nafi' is still evident today in the region, for instance in the town of Kairouan in northern Tunisia. Uqba ibn Nafi' brought with him many Muslims from Arabia, the early followers of the Prophet Muhammad. They settled and died in their new home in Kairouan. This is the tomb of Abu Zama al-Badawi, one of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad. Now, al-Badawi actually died about 40 kilometers from Kairouan, but he was brought here for burial. And local legend has it that buried with him are 3 hairs belonging to the Prophet Muhammad that apparently he always kept with him. The 7th century marked the start of a golden age in Kairouan. There were amenities and services. And when, for instance, the inhabitants of Kairouan suffered from water shortages,
the authorities here built reservoirs like this one behind me. The water was brought in via aqueducts from the hills west of Kairouan into the reservoirs. The water system, built so many centuries ago, is still very clear to see, and one can only marvel at the sophistication of its engineering.
after his campaign in what is today Tunisia, Uqba ibn Nafi' went to modern-day Algeria, where he was killed in battle by the Berbers.
هي معركة مشهورة شهيرة إلى الآن ما زال قبر عقبة معروف في الجزائر في الموقع الذي حصلت فيه المعركة فمات يعني قتل جيش عقبة بن نافع كله في هذه المعركة.
There was a gap of several decades before another Arab general, Musa ibn Nusayr, would go to North Africa to try to subdue the Berbers. Musa ibn Nusayr was one of the greatest Arab commanders in this period of history. He succeeded in bringing North Africa under Arab control, spreading Islam and expanding the influence of the Muslim Caliphate.
نعم موسى بن نصير يعني واصل في الحقيقة مشروع بناء الخلافة في هذه الفترة. تبين جليا بأن هذه القطعة من شمال إفريقيا تميزت بنوع من المقاومة. ابن خلدون المؤرخ الكبير يقول بأن البربر ارتدوا 40 مرة، يعني يسلمون ثم يرتدون. قد لا يكون هذا صحيحاً من حيث الرقم، ولكنه صحيح من حيث مقاومة الاحتلال ولكن قبول قيم الدين الجديد. فموسى بن نصير قدم وفي خطته استمالة المغاربة وتشجيع المبادرات الفردية في نشر الإسلام.
However, there were some Berbers who wanted neither Arab rule nor Islam, like the legendary Berber queen known as Kahina, or Kahina as the Arabs call her. Her name means priestess or soothsayer. She led the resistance to the Arabs and their religion. Kahina was believed to have been born in the early 7th century and has attained mythical status as a heroine for all the people of North Africa today. Moroccan historian Professor Nuhi Al-Wafi is a Berber or Amazigh, as they prefer to be called.
الكاهنة كانت أميرة في قومها أو كانت زعيمة في قبيلتها التي كانت في منطقة الأوراس، وهي في الجزء الشرقي من الجزائر في منطقة سوق هراس الحالي. فكانت توصف ببعد النظر وتوصف بأنها تقرأ الغيب، ولذلك تنبأت لما رأت مقدم العرب تنبأت بأن مستقبلا سيئا ينتظر المنطقة، وتنبأت بأنها ستقتل على يدهم.
As she predicted, Kahina was killed by the Arabs for refusing to accept Islam, but she urged her 2 sons to convert in order to survive.
This was the stronghold of Queen Kahina, the Ores Mountains of eastern Algeria. You can just imagine her using her knowledge of the terrain to attack the invading Arabs. Queen Kahina is a symbol both of Berber pride and strong female leadership right across North Africa. And it was here in Algeria that she died.
Kahina's stand against Islam may have been brave, but in the end, her resistance to the Islamization of the Berbers proved futile. But the introduction of Islam was often peaceful. By the end of the 7th century, a holy man from Mecca called Moulay Idris took refuge in the old Roman town of Volubilis in modern-day northern Morocco after experiencing problems in Mecca. Moulay Idris so impressed the Berbers with his piety that they made him their leader. He had children with a Berber woman called Kenza and gave his name to a new dynasty, the Idrisites. Moulay Idris was succeeded by his son Moulay Idris II. He expanded the state and in 807 moved his capital to Fez, which he wanted to turn into a center of enlightenment. Fez is home to the Kairouan Mosque, one of the finest in the world. According to local tradition, when Moulay Idris II died in 828,
he was buried here in this tomb, in this mosque, in his beloved Fes.
Upon his death, he was succeeded by his son Muhammad, but he turned to his mother Kenza for advice, and she told him to divide the kingdom amongst his father's 10 sons.
This weakened the Idrisite dynasty and spelt the beginning of the end of their rule.
But the Idrisites did manage to hang on to some of their power, and they continued to rule in a decentralized manner for nearly a century after. And Fez was established as one of the ancient centers of learning. In fact, it has the oldest university in continuous use in the world. Its old quarter dates back to the early 9th century, though the remains are mostly medieval. North Africa, with Kairouan in Tunisia as its capital, was very much part of the Islamic world, and there followed a period of history in which a succession of dynasties ruled one after the other. Some were North African, others from Arabia and what we now call the Middle East. Here are some of the most important dynasties. At the end of the 8th century, the Baghdad-based Abbasids appointed Ibrahim ibn al-Aghlab as governor of Tunisia. He founded the Aghlabid royal family, which ruled on behalf of Baghdad in North Africa. Then from Kabylie in central Algeria, a new dynasty emerged, the Fatimids. They followed the minority Shia sect, not the Sunni or mainstream form of Islam that most people adhere to in Africa. The Fatimids conquered North Africa, and a year later, their leader Abdullah declared a caliphate in modern-day Tunisia, just south of Kairouan. The Fatimids built a new capital called Mahadiya. Go there today and you see the hand of Fatima everywhere. Fatima was one of the daughters of the Prophet Muhammad.
Ahlan wa sahlan.
I get my own personalized version.
There we are. Abdul Latif engraved my name in Arabic, Zeinab Badawi. And that's the hand of Fatima, which will apparently bring me luck. The Grand Mosque just here was part of a massive building programme embarked upon by the Fatimids when they made Mahadiya their capital. It was founded in the early 10th century by the Caliph Abdullah al-Mahdi, and he gave the city his name. The Fatimids chose Mahadiya because of its closeness to the sea, and indeed today it is still one of Tunisia's most attractive ports.
Dr. Rida Boussafara is a Tunisian archaeologist and historian.
الفاطميون أو العرب بشكل عام كان عددهم قليل وكانوا يمثلون الطبقة الحاكمة في حين أن عموم الناس هم سكان أصليون أي هنالك تنظيم سياسي وتنظيم اجتماعي يعني محكم قبل مجيء العرب فهذه القبائل في معظمها أسلمت لكنها أبقت على عاداتها البربرية القديمة والفاطميون لم يتمكنوا من أخذ الحكم إلا بفضل إعانة بعض القبائل البربرية البربر هم دعامة الحكم وكانوا يعني هم الذين قاموا ببناء المدن وهم كانوا التجار وهم كانوا الحرفيون إذن هم كانوا يمثلون سواد المجتمع في تلك الفترة.
After gaining control of this part of North Africa, the Fatimids next turned their attention to Egypt. They had a strong and disciplined army, and in 969 they conquered Egypt. They built a new capital city, Cairo, and established its famous mosque, Al-Azhar.
The Al-Azhar Mosque in Cairo, which was built in the 10th century, for hundreds and hundreds of years, it has been the seat of Islamic learning for the Sunni form of Islam. But in fact, it was built by the Fatimid dynasty, who governed Egypt for 200 years, and they adhered to the Shia form of Islam.
Ensconced in Cairo, the Fatimids' hold on their dominions elsewhere came under challenge. In their former capital, Mahdia in Tunisia, a local family, the Zirids, were ruling on behalf of the Fatimids. But they opposed the minority Shia form of Islam practiced by them. So the Zirids broke away from the Fatimids around 1045 and established their own kingdom.
The period of rule under the Zirid dynasty was a high point in the history of this part of North Africa. From their base here in Mahdia along the Tunisian coast, the Zirid rulers presided over decades of prosperity across many economic sectors, including agriculture, trade and industry.
الفاطميون لما قرروا الرحيل إلى مصر بعد بناء القاهرة تركوا الحكم لقبيلة صنهاجة أو تسمى كذلك قبيلة الزيريون، بحكم أن جدهم الأول اسمه زيري ابن مناد، وكانوا متشيعين مثل الفاطميين في أول الأمر. لكنهم بعد مدة قصيرة الأمير الثالث الزيري وهو المعز ابن باديس رجع إلى عن المذهب الشيعي، وأعلن انتمائه للمذهب السني، نظرا أن سواد الشعب عموم الناس في تونس بقوا سنيون. فالفاطميون في مصر لمعاقبة الزيريين بعثوا إليهم قبائل متكونة من عشرات الآلاف من الصعيد المصري.
The Fatimid forces attacked the rebellious Zirids. The town of Mahdia was impregnable, but the rest of the region went into decline, and for several decades after, there was a power vacuum in North Africa. Then, around 1050, the Almoravids, the first of several new powerful Berber dynasties, emerged in what is today Morocco. And it was the Almoravids who founded the city of Marrakesh.
Marrakesh is probably the most important of the cities in Morocco built by its Berber dynasties. The Almoravids established a thriving city within these walls. They built many mosques and schools, which rapidly led to Marrakesh becoming the religious, cultural and trading centre of the Almoravid Empire.
The Almoravid ruler Yusuf ibn Tashfin was a powerful, charismatic man. Under him, the Almoravids seized control of much of Morocco and built an empire. Their power extended far and wide and included territory in modern-day Spain, Algeria, Libya, Mali, Mauritania and Senegal. Their capital, Marrakesh, was a meeting point for caravan routes. They became rich from trade, especially through selling salt for gold. They had so much gold that the Almoravid gold coin was the most trusted currency in the whole of the Mediterranean at this time. When Yusuf ibn Tashfin died around 1106, he was succeeded by his son, Ali. The first 20 years of Ali's rule saw Marrakesh grow even more in stature. But faced with unrest to the north and south, the Almoravids grew weaker, and by 1147, a new dynasty came to dominate the region, and they were the Almohads. The Almohads, like the Almoravids, were responsible for Islamizing North Africa. Religion was important to them. But the Almohads had a more philosophical, intellectual approach to religion and saw themselves as the chosen ones. To make their mark, the Almohads built the great Kutubiyya Mosque of Marrakesh alongside the stone remains of an earlier mosque they'd built.
Non-Muslims are not permitted to go inside the Al-Kutubiyya Mosque, but it's only when you enter that you get a sense of its scale, magnificence, yet striking simplicity. The Al-Kutubiyya Mosque is the most impressive legacy of the Almohad rulers of Morocco.
The Almohads' architectural heritage was one of their greatest achievements. They established a new capital on the site where Rabat, Morocco's current capital city, stands. But they also set up efficient government frameworks and coherent taxation systems. They were major patrons of philosophy and therefore helped stimulate new thinking, which later influenced European Renaissance intellectuals. Yusuf Yaqub al-Mansur, to give him his full name, was the third Almohad ruler. He was in power from 1184 to 1199 and was reputedly an accomplished man who wrote beautiful Arabic prose. Walking around the old quarters of the Almohad fortress of Rabat, you can almost feel the presence of the Almohads. By 1250, the power of the Almohads had drained away. By now, the most powerful of the Berber kingdoms was a dynasty known as the Merinids, a nomadic Berber tribe who encouraged the cult of holy men. Their most famous king was Abu al-Hassan, known as the Black Sultan. He ruled his empire with an iron fist, and under him, the city of Fez regained its former glory and once more became a center of culture and craftsmanship. Moroccan historian Professor Mohammed Kibri Alawi explains how the Merinids developed Fez and took other key cities such as Rabat and the nearby site of Chella.
But the site really came into its own with the Sultan from the Merinid dynasty known as the Black Sultan, who built the outside walls and the towers that we see standing today. What do we know about him?
À la fin du XIIIe siècle, après l'implantation d'un cimetière royal sous le règne du sultan Abou Youssouf Yaqoub, donc un sultan mérinide. La nécropole royale est établie en partie sur la ville romaine. Et le sultan noir, Abou al-Hassan, a agrandi ce cimetière royal. Et nous avons la date de construction du rempart, la fin des travaux de construction du rempart, qui est donc celle de 1339. Donc, travaux qui ont été ordonnés par le sultan noir, Abou al-Hassan, qui a accueilli les dépouilles mortelles de plusieurs sultans et princes de la dynastie mérinide. Il faut imaginer que des grandes personnalités, des sultans et des princes ont donc franchi la grande porte d'entrée par laquelle donc on accède aujourd'hui au site.
The Black Sultan, Abu al-Hassan, was forced to abdicate from power in 1351. He died in exile in the high Atlas Mountains, but he was buried here at the necropolis he founded at Chella. This is his tomb. It looks rather plain, but in fact, on top of it, there would have been a stela or a small pillar that would have been standing on it. It now is exhibited at the entrance to the site. Beside the Black Sultan's tomb is a smaller one, which has the remnants of a small marble pyramid. Historians and archaeologists can't be sure, but they believe that this is where his son, Abu Hisham, was buried, and he died in infancy.
C'est un site qui a cette importance aussi parce qu'il a gardé sa sacralité longtemps après l'abandon du site ou de ce cimetière en tant que lieu d'enterrement. On enterrait ici, sur le site de Chella, jusqu'à pratiquement le début du XXe siècle. Donc ça, le bassin aux Anguilles, qui est un lieu vénéré que toute la population locale connaît, c'est un bassin qui était donc à l'origine une source, c'était à l'origine un lieu d'ablution et il est le lieu le plus fréquenté par la population locale.
The Basin of Eels is still a big attraction too. Visitors are keen to see the eels, and I wonder if I might be able to bring some to the surface.
Well, fortunately, I got a helping hand from Alal, who has been guarding this pond for many, many years. And Alal, I saw that you just threw some boiled egg into the pond, and I saw an eel emerge. Yeah. So how long have you been doing this? طيب لك كم مدة كم سنة؟ I have to talk to him in Arabic. لك كم سنة شغال هنا؟
أنا 40 سنة. حتى نعطيك البيضة ونعطي البيضة للتورست فحلقة باش يشوفوا يعني السمك النون eels.
Eels أيوة. So he said that he خليك معي شوية يا حاج. He said that the tourists come and they give him money, and what he does is he throws bits of boiled egg into the water and the eels emerge. That's what people want to see.
يجوا تورست كثيرين يعني من بريطانيا، من أمريكا، من الألمان، من هولندا، من بلجيك، من الروس، من
أي مكان.
من أي مكان يجوا لعندنا.
Alal and I are able to converse together in Arabic because of the Arab influence in Morocco and Sudan, where I was born. But the impact of the Arabs and their religion and language was not confined to just northern Africa. Islam was also introduced to West Africa by the 8th century through trade across the Sahara. But there was only a significant Muslim presence there by the 11th century, for instance, in what is today Senegal. Today, nearly all Senegalese are Muslim. And when it comes to the lunchtime prayers on Friday, most people stop what they're doing and go to one of the many mosques in the capital, Dakar. The Grand Mosque is a dominant feature of Dakar. It was built by the late Moroccan king Hassan II. Tierno Kar is an authority on Islam and director of the Islamic Institute in Dakar. He told me more about how Islam took hold in Senegal through the teachings and preachings of Sufi mystics like the Marabout sect.
La pénétration de l'islam au Sénégal, ça date depuis le début du XIe siècle. Les musulmans sénégalais ou africains de l'Afrique de l'Ouest ont appris l'islam par des marabouts enseignants. La confrérie la plus ancienne en Afrique, c'est la confrérie qadirite. C'est la première confrérie qui a pénétré dans notre pays.
And in East Africa, Islam also has strong and deep roots. The Muslims of what is today Eritrea claim to have some of the earliest Muslim converts on the continent when followers of the Prophet Muhammad fled across the Red Sea from Mecca to the coast of what is today Eritrea. In fact, this small building on the Eritrean coast is claimed by the Eritreans as the first Muslim shrine in Africa, for it's believed to be the site where followers of the Prophet Muhammad prayed when they fled Mecca for Africa in the early 7th century. Elsewhere in East Africa, Islam arrived later, around the 13th century, as Felix Chami, a Tanzanian historian, tells me as we walk along the island of Zanzibar.
On the coast of East Africa today, we really started from Madagascar in the south, southern Mozambique, going all the way up north to Kenya. If we want, we can extend to southern Somalia. We know from the Roman time period, we are told there were kings in Azania on the coast of East Africa. And these kings had territories in which people were very much free. They were living in a very free kind of life. So influence of Arabs can be traced much back from that of Swahili time period, 1200 AD. Because here now we can see actually Islamic religion being adopted.
Since Arabic is the language of the Quran, this meant the Arabic script was used to write the Swahili language that's spoken mostly on the east coast of Africa.
The Swahili coastal culture is a fusion of local African, Arab and Indian influences. For instance, the Swahili language spoken in this part of Africa incorporates many Arabic words and was first written in the Arabic script.
These two carpenters in Stone Town, Zanzibar, are chatting away in Swahili while they go about their work. You can make out words of Arabic origin here and there in the conversation.
Hupati angalau kula kazi zetu mpaka utoke.
Mtu hajui wewe unaumwa, hajui una matatizo gani, yeye kishakupa patenti yake basi kisha wewe huna amani hata kidogo.
Lakini mtu anataka ukiitia pap kesho anaitaka.
Achukue.
Achukue.
Sasa utachukua vipi kitu hicho kilichokuwa ina kitu hichi? Si kama ni kitu cha.
Clearly, the legacy of the Arabs, their religion and language is evident in Africa today, not only in parts of the east and west, but particularly in the north. It would be easy to categorize North Africa as just being part of the Arab world and somehow separate from the rest of Africa. But North Africans share a legacy with millions of people elsewhere on the continent. As we've seen, the powerful Berber dynasties like the Almoravids and the Almohads had deep ties with other Africans. And the fusion of the Arab influence with African culture has given rise to something unique to Africa. I'm left with the thought that Africa surely is the most complex, varied, and diverse of all the world's continents. Its rich culture and heritage mean it has a fascinating and much overlooked history. This series has been guided and inspired throughout by a unique project, the General History of Africa, undertaken by UNESCO on behalf of African nations to bring an African perspective to the continent's history. Because everybody, young and old, African and non-African alike, should understand that Africa's history is, after all, part of our global story.